I'm filing for a divorce. And when I'm done, the whole world will see exactly what a finished woman you are. He said that to her face, in the same apartment she had decorated with her own hands, in the same city she had learned to call home. Then he went to dinner in Apgujeong with his friends, and they all laughed about it. Who is going to want her now? A divorced African woman in Seoul? He said that too, out loud, like she was something that had simply expired, someone that had no meaning whatsoever to him. And for a while, it looked like he was right. She packed 2 suitcases. She left the Gangnam penthouse. She went back to the States with nothing but her name and a wound she refused to show anyone. But here is what Choi Jae-hyun did not calculate. Here is the part he never saw coming. The same city that broke her was about to introduce her to a man so powerful, so dangerous, so completely out of Jae-hyun's league, that when he finally heard what had transpired, he would not sleep for 3 days. Welcome to Afro-Korean Love Stories. On today's episode, I'm bringing you friendship, power, romance, love, jealousy, betrayal, and character development. If you're just joining us for the first time, hit that like button, subscribe, seat back, and allow me draw you into my world of tales. Tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd really love to know. Now, let's get back to this amazing story. Ado Okonkwo did not grow up soft. Her father, Chief Emeka Okonkwo, built his trade and logistics empire from a single shipping contract and 3 decades of relentless discipline. Her mother ran spreadsheets at the dinner table and called it love language. Ada grew up understanding that beauty was a gift, but sharpness was a weapon. And she had been given both in equal measure. She studied international trade law in Paris. She mastered Korean in 2 years because she wanted it badly enough. By the time she arrived in Seoul at 25, she moved through the city with the quiet confidence of a woman who belonged everywhere she chose to stand. Choi Jae-hyun noticed her at an international economic forum in Seoul. She was in the middle of asking a question that made 3 senior professors visibly uncomfortable.
He thought she was extraordinary.
He told her so in the elevator 30 seconds after the session ended. She looked him over once and said his suit was expensive, but his argument in the room was weak. He laughed. He asked if he could take her to dinner to defend himself. She said he had exactly 1 chance. That dinner lasted 4 hours. They closed the restaurant without noticing. Jae-hyun was different from the Korean men who had tried to court her before. He was curious about her in a way that felt genuine. He asked about Lagos, about her father's business, about what it felt like to study law in Paris as a Nigerian woman who spoke French with a Yoruba lilt. He leaned in when she talked. He remembered everything she said. Ada was careful. She had always been careful. But there was something about the way he looked at her, like she was the most interesting thing he had encountered in years, that made careful feel less necessary than it usually did. They dated for 8 months before he introduced her to his family. Ada noticed, even then, that 8 months was a long time to wait for an introduction. She filed it quietly in the back of her mind and said nothing. Madam Choi Yun-suk received her with perfect manners and cold eyes. The kind of cold that does not announce itself. It simply settles over everything like a drop in temperature you cannot trace to any open window. Ada felt it immediately. She smiled warmly, spoke respectfully, and understood in that first meeting exactly what she was walking into. She chose Jae-hyun anyway, because he was not his mother, because in those early years he worked hard to prove that. They got engaged at the 2-year mark. The proposal was private, just the 2 of them, a rooftop in Itaewon, the Han River below. Ada said yes not because it was grand but because it was quiet, and quiet felt like truth. The wedding made Korean entertainment news. Lagos celebrated for 3 days. From every angle, it looked like the kind of love story worth telling. It wasn't. The first year was good. Not perfect. Madam Choi's presence hung over everything like weather, but good. Jae-hyun was attentive. They built a life inside the Gangnam penthouse that felt, most mornings, like something real. The second year was when the fractures started showing. Small things at first. Jae-hyun growing quiet after events where Ada commanded a room. A comment here. You don't have to have an opinion about everything, Ada. A request there. Can you just let me handle this one? Just this once. She adjusted. She softened edges she did not want to soften. She told herself this was what marriage required: compromise, accommodation, the slow negotiation of two strong personalities learning to share space. But it was not compromise he wanted. She understood that by year 3, what Jae-hyun wanted was for Ada to become smaller. Quietly, gradually. So gradually that she would not notice until she looked in the mirror one day and could not find herself. His mother fed it constantly. A word in his ear after every family dinner. She embarrassed you in front of the Lees tonight. A Choi wife does not argue with her husband's associates. She is never going to understand what this family requires. Madame Choi was patient and precise, and she had been working on her son for 35 years before Ada arrived. Ada never stood a chance against that kind of patience. By year 4, Jae-hyun had stopped being curious about her. He looked at her now the way people look at furniture: present, familiar, unremarkable. The man who had closed a restaurant asking about Lagos and Yoruba inflection and Paris law schools was gone. Ada did not know exactly when he had left. That was the cruelest part. There was no single moment she could point to. Just a slow disappearance she had been watching helplessly for 2 years.
She tried.
She tried in the ways women try when they love someone and refuse to accept what they are seeing. Conversations that went nowhere. A marriage counselor Jae-hyun attended twice and then canceled. A weekend trip to Jeju that was pleasant on the surface and hollow underneath. The divorce was not an argument. It was an ambush. A rumor planted quietly in the press. Whispers about Ada's health, her inability to give the Choi family what it needed. A scene manufactured at a charity gala, carefully staged to look like Ada losing composure in public. Loud enough to be remembered. Calculated enough to leave no fingerprints that pointed back to Madame Choi's elegant hands. A legal process so thoroughly engineered that Ada, a trade lawyer, a woman who understood contracts and fine print better than most, walked out of 5 years of marriage with 2 suitcases and her father's name. Jae-hyun signed the papers on a Tuesday without looking at her once. That same evening, he was at dinner in Apgujeong. Laughing. You already know what he said. Ada flew to Washington, D.C. 3 days after the divorce was finalized. Her brother, Tobe, sharp, stubborn, 2 years older, was already there. He had been running the American side of Okonkwo trade and logistics from a modest office in Maryland for 4 years. The company was not in crisis, but it was bleeding: bad contracts, slow growth, their father's illness pulling the center of gravity out of the entire operation. Tobe picked her up from Dulles Airport himself. He took one look at her face when she came through arrivals, composed, dry-eyed, completely sealed, and said nothing. He just took her bag, drove her to his apartment, put food in front of her. They did not talk about Jae-hyun that night, or the next night,
Or the one after that.
On the 4th morning, Ada came downstairs at 6 a.m., opened Tobe's laptop, pulled up the company financials, and said, "We need to talk about what's actually wrong with this business." Tobe looked at her from across the kitchen. Something in his chest settled. She was still Ada. They divided it cleanly. Tobe would return to Lagos, manage the operational infrastructure, the port relationships, the staffing. Ada would stay in the States and drive international business development. New partnerships, new markets, new revenue streams that could carry the company into the next decade. It was the right structure. It was also, quietly, the structure that kept Ada from having to go home and be looked at with pity by everyone who loved her. She threw herself into work the way some people throw themselves into water when they are drowning, completely, desperately, because the alternative was worse. 18-hour days.
Cold coffee.
Video calls with Tobe at midnight his time, 6 a.m. hers. She rebuilt the company's pitch framework from scratch. She renegotiated 3 contracts that had been bleeding them quietly for years. She flew to London, then Brussels, then Dubai, always with a 1-page brief she had written herself, always the most prepared person in any room she entered. In 14 months, Okonkwo trade and logistics stopped bleeding. In 18 months, it was growing. And on a Tuesday evening in her Maryland apartment, the same day of the week Jae-hyun had signed those papers, her father called from Lagos. His voice was tired but warm.
Ada.
"There is something I need you to look at." He sent a file 20 minutes later. A Korea-Africa Trade Summit invitation. An infrastructure partnership opportunity that could anchor the company's entire East Asia expansion. The kind of contract that did not come twice. The summit was in Seoul. Ada sat with that for a long time. She thought about the Gangnam penthouse. The gala. Madame Choi's face. The papers signed on a Tuesday. Then she thought about her father's voice. About Tobe in Lagos working 18-hour days of his own. About every employee whose name she had learned and whose salary depended on what she did next. She opened the file. She read every page. Then she booked her flight to Seoul. She did not come back as anyone's ex-wife. She did not come back carrying what had been done to her like luggage. She came back as Director Ada Okonkwo, Head of International Partnerships, Okonkwo Trade and Logistics, with a 6-week-old proposal, a brief she could defend from any angle, and a quiet fury she had learned, over 18 months, to wear like perfume. She chose a hotel in Mapogu deliberately. Far from Gangnam. Far from every corner that held a ghost. She dressed differently now. Sharper. She used to soften herself in Seoul. Her laugh, her opinions, the full weight of her presence. She had learned that softening yourself for a room does not make the room love you. It just makes you disappear faster. She was done disappearing. The Korean business press picked up her name within 4 days of her arrival. A small line in a trade publication. Then a photograph outside the summit venue. Poised, striking, entirely unbothered. Jae-hyun saw it over lunch in Apgujeong. He laughed. He actually laughed. The Korea-Africa Trade Summit was held at the Grand Hyatt in Yongsan on a gray Thursday morning in October. 41 senior investors in the room. Most of them had heard of Okonkwo Trade and Logistics. None of them had expected her. Ada walked in wearing deep burgundy, structured, striking, unapologetically herself. She set up her presentation without looking at the audience. She had learned that trick from her father. Never perform nervousness. Even when it is there, you bury it so deep it becomes fuel. She was 12 minutes into her presentation when the door at the back of the room opened. She did not look up. She kept speaking. But something shifted in the room. A particular kind of stillness, the kind that only one kind of presence creates. She registered it. Stored it.
Kept going.
Park Seon-woo sat down at the back without a word. His acquisition director, Youngmin Seo, was already in the room and looked at him with an expression that said everything. Seon had not been scheduled to attend. He had glanced at the briefing notes the night before, seen the name Okonkwo, seen the West African port exclusivity angle, and changed his morning. He told himself it was strategic.
It was.
But it was also something else, something he did not have a clean name for yet. He watched her field questions. She was precise without being rigid, warm without being soft. When a senior investor, a man who wore his skepticism like a badge of seniority, asked whether Okonkwo's port access was truly exclusive or merely preferential, Ada paused. One beat. Clean and deliberate. Then she clicked to a slide that had not been in the original deck. A signed exclusivity agreement, finalized at 7 that morning. She had been holding it the entire presentation, waiting for exactly this moment. Truly exclusive. Signed this morning. Page 11 of your briefing folder. Would you like a moment? The investor did not answer. The room shifted in that invisible way rooms do when something has been settled beyond argument. Seon uncrossed his arms. After the session ended, the investors moved toward the refreshment table. Seon moved toward Ada. She saw him coming. She kept her expression completely neutral. She knew exactly who he was. Everyone in Korean business knew who he was. The public face was immaculate. Forbes features, government partnerships, the Kira Holdings name on half the infrastructure development along the Korean coast. What lived beneath that surface was spoken about only in careful voices in careful rooms. He stopped 2 feet from her. He did not extend his hand immediately. The secondary slide, he said. You held it deliberately. She met his eyes without any flicker. Theatrics matter in a room like this. They do. A pause that felt longer than it was. Kira Holdings would like a private meeting. Thursday. Ada thought of her calendar. She thought of Jae-hyun laughing in Apgujeong. I can move Thursday, she said. The Thursday meeting lasted 4 hours. It was supposed to last one. Cian's team had prepared a standard acquisition interest framework. Ada arrived with a counter framework she had built in 48 hours that was so thoroughly researched that Jung Min-so leaned over to Cian mid-meeting and whispered. She anticipated every pressure point. Cian said nothing. He was already aware. They disagreed on 3 structural terms. Each time, Ada held her position without aggression, without apology, and without blinking. Each time, Cian found himself not annoyed, but genuinely, unexpectedly interested. He could not remember the last time someone in a meeting room made him work this hard without raising their voice. They reached a preliminary agreement as the city outside turned dark. His driver was waiting. Her cab was ordered. They stood in the elevator in a silence that had weight to it, not uncomfortable, just full. "You speak Korean well," he said as the elevator descended. "I lived here for 5 years," she said simply. He didn't push.
She didn't explain.
The elevator opened, and they went their separate ways. But Cian sat in his car for a moment before telling his driver to move. He was not a man who sat in cars doing nothing. He was always on his phone, always moving to the next thing. His driver had worked for him for 6 years and had never once seen him simply sit. He sat for 40 seconds. Then drive. The meetings became a series. Then working dinners. Then calls in the evening that started about logistics and drifted, slowly, into everything else. Ada showed Cian a version of Seoul she had rebuilt for herself, a city she was learning to navigate again not as someone's wife, but as her own person. He showed her corners of Seoul most people never found. A Pojangmaka in Yeoljiro he had been going to alone for years. A rooftop in Mapogu where the view made conversation feel unnecessary. One evening over cold makgeolli and the sound of distant traffic, she asked him why he had come to her summit presentation himself when he could have sent anyone. He was quiet for a moment. "I read your proposal the night before," he said. "The section on West African port infrastructure. You wrote it like someone who is angry." Ada looked at him. "I was." "That kind of writing is honest," he said. "I wanted to meet someone that honest." She didn't know what to do with that. She stored it somewhere quiet inside herself and changed the subject. But she thought about it later, alone in her hotel room, in the particular way you think about things that land somewhere they were not supposed to reach. One evening after a contract review session, she stayed behind to finish notes while his team cleared out. He brought her tea without being asked, green tea, no sugar, which he had noticed without meaning to. She looked up when he set it down. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said, and went back to his desk. She stared at the tea for a moment. Then she smiled to herself, quietly, where he couldn't see. But he had angled his chair.
He saw.
And that was exactly the problem. Because Ada had felt it happening, slowly, quietly, the way seasons change before you name them. Something in the way he remembered small things. The tea without sugar. The way he adjusted his pace to match hers on evening walks without making a performance of it. The way his eyes found her first whenever she entered a room. She had felt it, and it terrified her. Because she had promised herself, standing in that Dulles arrivals hall with 2 suitcases and a sealed face, that she would never again let a man in a city like this become the thing she organized her feelings around. She had done that once. She had given Seoul her softness, her adjustments, her quiet surrenders. She had loved carefully and been dismantled carefully, and she was absolutely not going to walk back into that. So she had been withdrawing. Slowly. Deliberately. Keeping their conversations anchored to documents and timelines. Refusing to linger after meetings ended. Stopping herself mid-thought whenever her mind drifted toward him in the quiet hours of the night. She was keeping it business. She was being smart. She was protecting the only thing she had successfully rebuilt, herself. And then Cian pulled back first. Less available. Shorter meetings. More formal in his responses. And the thing she felt when he did, the thing she refused to examine too closely, was not relief after all. It sat in her chest wrong. Too quiet. Too much like something she recognized from 5 years ago when Jae-hyun's curiosity about her began to fade, and she kept telling herself it was fine. She showed up to their next scheduled meeting exactly, as prepared as always. Gave nothing away. Left precisely on time. But that night, Alone in her hotel room in Mapogu, she sat on the edge of the bed and looked at nothing for a long time. She was not falling. She told herself that firmly. She was not falling. Then he called. "I'm not good at this," he said when she picked up. She was quiet. "Then, neither am I." "I don't want to stop," he said. The silence between them stretched long, the kind that holds more than words can carry. "Then don't," she said. She hung up before either of them could say something they couldn't take back. She set her phone face down on the nightstand. She lay back on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. She was not falling, but she already had. 3 weeks after that phone call, Ada was late to a meeting for the first time since she arrived in Seoul. Not because of traffic. Not because of work. Because she had been standing in front of her hotel mirror for 11 minutes trying to decide if what she was feeling was visible on her face. And if it was, how to remove it before she walked into a room where Park Seon-woo was already sitting. She arrived 4 minutes late. He was at the head of the table, mid-conversation with Young Minesio. He glanced up when she entered. He said nothing, but he pulled out the chair beside him instead of the one across, a small thing, an almost invisible thing, and went straight back to his conversation. She sat down, opened her brief, told herself it meant nothing. It meant something. His most trusted lieutenant, Dae-young, brought it to him directly one morning. Dae-young was the only person in Seon's world permitted to say the things nobody else would say. He had earned that permission over 12 years of absolute loyalty and zero flattery. He sat across from Seon in the Uedo office and placed a single photograph on the desk. It was from a business dinner 3 nights prior, taken by one of their routine security detail. Ada and Seon at a corner table in Hanamdong. Not touching. Not doing anything that could be called inappropriate. Just talking. But the photograph captured something in the angle of Seon's body toward her, the particular quality of his attention, that said everything a caption never could. Dae-young tapped the photograph once. "The Alkonkwo partnership is visible now," he said. "Not just professionally." Seon looked at the photograph for a moment. Then at Dae-young. "I'm not asking you to stop," Dae-young said carefully. "I'm asking you to decide. Because the way you're moving, that is not how you move around a business contact." "I know," Seon said. "She doesn't know everything about what we are," Dae-young said. "She knows enough." "That's not the same thing." Seon said nothing. Because there was nothing to say. Dae-young was right, and they both knew it. Dae-young picked up the photograph, stood, and paused at the door. "She survived something that would have broken most people," he said quietly. "Whatever you decide carefully." He left the room. Seon sat with that conversation for 3 days. He pulled back, less available, shorter meetings, more formal. He told himself it was the responsible thing. He told himself distance was protection. He told himself a great many things over those 3 days, in the way that people construct arguments for positions they have already emotionally abandoned. On the 3rd night, he picked up his phone and called her. You already know what happened next. What neither of them spoke about, what lived in the space between every conversation they had, was Jae-hyun. Not as a wound. Ada was past the wound stage. But as a lesson. A lesson she had written in her own blood about what it cost to love someone in a city that did not belong to you, in a life built entirely around someone else's name. Seon knew the broad outline. Korean business circles were small and had long memories. He knew about the divorce, the manufactured scandal, the settlement stripped to almost nothing. He knew what the Choi family had done, and he knew how it had been done. What he did not know, what Ada had never told anyone except Tobe, and even then only once, on a phone call at 2 a.m. 6 months after she left Seoul, was what it had actually felt like. Not the legal mechanics of it. The actual feeling of waking up in a city you had chosen, in an apartment you had made a home, and understanding slowly, and then all at once, that the person lying next to you had spent years resenting you for being exactly who you were. She was not going to tell Seon that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But he sensed the outline of it, the way perceptive people sense the shape of things they have not been shown directly. And he adjusted around it without naming it, the way you adjust your step around something fragile without making the other person feel watched. She noticed. She did not comment on it. But she noticed. Jae-hyun made his first move on a Wednesday. It was subtle. A word to an old contact at a development finance company. One of Okonkwo's pending partnership approvals in the Korean market hit an unexpected delay. Bureaucratic, vague, the kind of obstruction that is impossible to prove and very easy to manufacture if you know the right people.
Just a pause.
Just a reminder that Seoul still had gatekeepers, and some of them had been eating at the Choi family's table for 20 years. Ada figured it out in 3 days. She sat with what she knew. She traced the thread carefully, following it back through the delay to the contact to the connection, to the name she had been expecting to find at the end of it. Jae-hyun. Still writing her ending. Still convinced he had the pen. She said nothing out loud.
She did not call Tobe.
She did not tell Seon. She simply rerouted the partnership through a different channel, one she had quietly identified as a backup 3 weeks earlier because Ada Okonkwo had learned to build her own exits into every room she entered. The obstruction dissolved within a week. The partnership moved forward. She filed it away, said nothing. But something had shifted in her. A door she had been trying to leave open. The door that said maybe Jae-hyun had simply moved on. Maybe the city had room enough for both of them without collision. That door closed now. Quietly. Permanently. He was still watching. He was still trying. Which meant this was not over. Let's pause for a moment. I need your opinion on this. Right now, Ada is sitting with a secret that could change everything. She has just discovered that her ex-husband is quietly working to destroy what she has spent 18 months bleeding to build. She handled it alone.
Cleanly.
Without asking anyone for help. But Seon does not know. And between these two people, something has started that neither of them planned for, and both of them are struggling to outrun. Ada has every reason to keep her walls up. And Seon has every reason to keep his distance. So I want to ask you, do you think Ada was right to handle Jae-hyun's interference alone? Or do you think not telling Seon was the first crack in something that could cost her later? Drop your answer in the comments. And while you're there, tell me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. Because this story is far from over. Trust me, you do not want to come back and find out you missed it. Jae-hyun gave the interview on a Friday. It was a lifestyle and business magazine, the kind with glossy covers and carefully crafted questions designed to make powerful men feel celebrated. The interviewer asked about his time in the international spotlight, about his first marriage, about the, and this was the exact word used, complexity of cross-cultural unions. Jae-hyun settled back in his chair. He smiled the way men smile when they have rehearsed, looking unbothered. She was my wife, yes. A lovely woman. I always wished her well. A small pause. Measured. Some people thrive better in familiar surroundings. Seoul is a demanding city.
He said it gently.
He said it with the tone of a man being gracious about someone he pitied. Someone he had tried his best with. Someone the city had simply been too much for. The implication was immaculate. Surgical. She couldn't handle it. She went back to where she belonged. She was lovely, but limited. It published on a Saturday morning. By Sunday evening, it had been shared thousands of times across Korean business and social media. Ada's name trended briefly. Comments divided, some defending her, many agreeing with the quiet condescension of a man who had once chosen her and was now explaining, with great gentleness, why she had not been enough. Ada read it once. She put her phone face down on the hotel counter. She stood at her window looking at the Mapo skyline for a long time. She did not cry. She had already spent every tear she owned on this man. She was completely empty of him. She picked her phone back up and replied to 3 work emails. Seon saw the interview that same Sunday evening. One of his team flagged it, routine monitoring of names that appeared in intelligence reports adjacent to people Seon watched. The flag was standard. The content was not. He read it twice.
Set his phone down on his desk.
His Udo office was quiet at that hour, floor-to-ceiling glass, the Han River below, the kind of silence that fills expensive rooms at night and asks you uncomfortable questions. He thought about Ada at the trade summit, the secondary slide, the steadiness of her in a room full of men waiting for her to need something. He thought about the Pojangmaka in Yuljiro and the way she laughed, fully, without calculation, when something struck her as genuinely funny. He thought about what it costs. what it actually physically costs to come back to a city that broke you. To walk into its boardrooms with your shoulders level and your brief prepared, and your face giving nothing away, while the people who dismantled you watch from a comfortable distance and wait for you to fail. He thought about all of that. Then he made 2 phone calls. Both brief. Both very quiet. The kind of calls that do not require explanation on either end, because the people receiving them have been waiting years to receive exactly this kind of instruction. He did not tell Ada. By Tuesday, the Choi conglomerate's flagship hotel development in Incheon had lost its primary financing partner. The withdrawal was described in a terse press statement as a strategic reallocation of capital.
Clean.
Untraceable. By Thursday, their Japanese hospitality license renewal had entered an unexpected regulatory review that industry insiders described as unusual and difficult to explain. By the following Monday, 2 of Jaehyun's most trusted board members had submitted quiet resignations within 24 hours of each other. Jaehyun spent 2 weeks trying to find the thread. He called contacts. He hired someone to investigate. He sat in his Apgujeong apartment at night retracing every decision, every enemy, every deal that could have activated this kind of quiet, coordinated pressure. He could not find a source.
It did not look like an attack.
It looked like weather. Like several unrelated pieces of bad fortune arriving at the same time. He never once considered that it had arrived in Ada's name. That was the thing about men like Jaehyun. They never imagined consequences wearing her face. Ada and Sean had dinner the Wednesday after the interview published. Neither of them had canceled. Neither had acknowledged the interview directly. They met at a small restaurant in Hanamdong, private, dim, the kind of place that did not appear on any public reservation platform, and talked about a logistics framework she had been refining for the past 10 days. Halfway through dinner, she put her chopsticks down. "I know you did something," she said. He looked at her steadily.
After the interview, she said,
"I know it was you." He did not confirm it. He did not deny it. He simply held her gaze. "It wasn't yours to fight," she said. Not angry. Just honest. "I know," he said. "I fought a different part of it." She looked at him for a long moment. Outside, Seoul moved in its endless way, indifferent, relentless, luminous. Inside this small, dim restaurant, something between them had shifted into a register that neither of them could any longer pretend was professional. Seon. "I know," he said, before she could finish. "You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to say this is complicated." She almost smiled. "It is complicated." "Yes," he said simply. "It is." He reached across the table, unhurried, no performance in it, and covered her hand with his. The gesture was so quiet, so certain, like a decision that had already been made long before this moment, and was only now being said out loud through touch. Ada looked down at his hand over hers. In that moment, something she had been holding tightly, carefully, with both hands since a Tuesday 2 years ago, when a man signed papers without looking at her, loosened. Not all the way, but enough. She turned her hand over and held his back. They walked along the Han River after dinner, because neither of them wanted the night to end. It was cold, the sharp particular cold of a Seoul November that bites at your face and makes your breath visible in the air. Ada pulled her coat tighter. Seon, without a word, slowed his pace and positioned himself on the side of the wind. She felt it. She said nothing about it, but she felt it. "Why have you never married?" she asked. It came out more directly than she intended. He was quiet long enough that she thought he might let it pass. "I never found anyone I wanted to protect," he said. "Not in the way that matters." Ada stopped walking. He stopped too. He turned to look at her. The Han River moved behind him. The city lights scattered across the water. He stood there in the cold Seoul night, this man who commanded silent rooms and made empires recalculate, and looked at her with something entirely unguarded in his face. Something she had not seen on a man's face in a very long time. She took one step toward him. He closed the rest of the distance. Now here is what nobody tells you about falling for someone when you are still carrying the weight of the last person who broke you. It does not feel like falling. Not at first. It feels like danger. It feels like standing at the edge of something high and looking down and knowing that the ground is real and the fall is real and you have been here before and you remember exactly how it felt to land.
Ada knew all of that. She knew it in her body.
She stepped toward him, anyway. And for the first time since she had come back to Seoul, since she had walked back into the city with her shoulders level and her brief prepared and her quiet fury worn like perfume, she let herself want something that was not on any spreadsheet, that could not be renegotiated if it went wrong, that had no backup channel, no exit she had quietly prepared 3 weeks in advance. She let herself want him. And Cian, who had spent 15 years building a life with no visible edges, no exposed surfaces, nothing that could be used, stood on the bank of the Han River in November and felt every single wall he had constructed become, in that moment, completely beside the point. What he did not tell her that night, what he could not yet tell her, was that his expansion into West Africa had placed him in direct conflict with a rival network that had been circling for months. They had been patient,
Strategic.
and they had recently identified something they could use. Not his business. Not his money. Something closer. Dae-young had brought him the intelligence report 4 days ago. Cian had read it once, filed it, and had not slept properly since. Because the report did not mention Kira Holdings. It did not mention any of his known associates or assets. It mentioned Ada. The Seoul International Infrastructure Gala was held on a Friday evening in December at the Grand Ballroom of the Lotte Hotel in Sogongdong. Every significant name in Korean development finance would be there. Government ministers, chaebol representatives, international investors. The kind of room where deals worth billions were made between handshakes and champagne, where who you walked in with said everything about where you stood. Jae-hyun had been looking forward to this evening for weeks. His company had taken some strange, unexplained hits recently. The financing withdrawal, the regulatory review, the board resignations he still could not explain. But nothing catastrophic. Nothing he could not recover from publicly. Tonight he would be in the room. He would be seen. He would remind everyone that the Choi name was still standing. He arrived at 7:15. He worked the room with practiced ease. Laughed well. Shook hands firmly. Told himself that everything was fine. At 7:42, the room shifted. That particular silence. The kind Ada had felt at the trade summit 2 months ago. The kind that only one kind of presence creates. Jae-hyun was mid-conversation when he registered it. He turned because everyone turned. Park Seon-woo had walked through the main entrance. And beside him, in a floor-length deep green gown that made every light in the room seem to recalibrate around her, was Ada. Her hand was in his. Not staged. Not performed. Just real and quiet and settled. The way things look when they have already been decided long before anyone else is watching. Jae-hyun stood very still. His champagne glass was halfway to his mouth. It stayed there. His associate beside him said something he did not hear. The room continued its elegant noise around him, and he stood in the middle of it completely frozen, watching the woman he had told the world was finished walk through the most important room in Korean business on the arm of the most powerful man in it. Cian moved through the room with Ada at his side and introduced her to every person who mattered. The governor of the Korea Development Bank, the CEO of Hyundai Engineering, the Minister of Land and Infrastructure, the chairman of the Seoul Port Authority. Not as his companion, not as his guest, as the most strategically significant business partner I have worked with in the last 5 years. People leaned in when she spoke. She was precise and luminous and entirely herself, the deep green of her gown against her skin catching the light in a way that made her impossible to look away from. She spoke about West African infrastructure with the authority of someone who had bled for the knowledge. She asked questions that made ministers pause and reconsider. She laughed once, that full, uncalculated laugh, at something the Korea Development Bank governor said, and the governor looked quietly delighted to have caused it. Cian watched her work the room and felt something in his chest that he did not have a clean business word for. At one point, across the width of the ballroom, Ada's eyes met Jae-hyun's. She had known he was there. She had clocked him within 4 minutes of arriving. She had said nothing to Cian about it, simply filed it, and continued her conversation with the minister's deputy. Now she held Jae-hyun's gaze. She did not perform triumph. She did not perform coldness. She performed absolutely nothing because this was not a performance. She simply looked at him the way you look at something that used to have power over you and no longer does. Steady, unhurried, complete. Then she looked away first, not because she had to, because she was done.
2 years.
He had spent 2 years convinced she was somewhere diminished. That soul had filed her down to something manageable. That she had gone back to familiar surroundings, as he had so graciously suggested in print, and become smaller. She had not become smaller. She had become this. Later, the city spread below them and the Han River a dark ribbon of light in the distance. Ada stood on the hotel terrace with a glass of champagne she had barely touched. Cian came to stand beside her. He did not speak immediately. They stood in the cold together the way they had learned to be comfortable, without filling silence just to fill it. "How do you feel?" he asked. She thought about it. The honest way. The Ada way. "Like I've been carrying something for 2 years, she said. "And somewhere tonight I realized I set it down, and I don't know exactly when it happened." He looked at her. "Good. I didn't do any of this for him," she said. "Meaning the gala. Meaning the introductions. Meaning all of it, everything, the whole return." "I know," Cian said. "That's why it worked." She turned to look at him fully. This man who had walked into her trade summit on a gray October morning and rearranged everything without asking permission. Who made her tea without being asked and remembered it without sugar. Who pulled out the chair beside him instead of a cross. Who stood against the wind on riverwalks without ever making a story of it. Who fought quietly on her behalf and never once waited to be thanked. "I'm still scared," she said. Plainly. No apology in it. "So am I," he said. She searched his face. "Your world is dangerous." "Yes. I'm not going to pretend I don't know that." "I don't want you to pretend anything," he said. "I never have." She held his gaze for a long moment. Everything she had been, the girl who studied law in Paris, the woman who learned Korean because she wanted it badly enough, the wife who softened herself into near invisibility, the director who came back to a city that broke her and built something anyway, all of it lived in that moment. All of it brought her to exactly here. "Then don't make me regret not pretending," she said. He reached up and touched her face. Just his hand against her cheek, slow and deliberate, the way all his important decisions were made. She leaned into it slightly. That small involuntary give. The kind of movement the body makes when it has already surrendered what the mind was still negotiating. "I won't," he said. "But here is what the story does not show you. The part that happened after the terrace, after the gala, after the Han River photograph that would appear in 3 Korean business publications the following week without either of them having posed for it. It was not easy. It was never going to be easy." Cian told her about the intelligence report 2 weeks later. He told her everything, not the softened version, not the version edited for her comfort. The full truth of what his world was, what it required, and what it meant that her name had appeared in a document it should never have appeared in. Ada sat with that for a long time. She asked questions, precise, unflinching questions that made Dae-young, sitting quietly in the corner of that meeting, look at Cian with something close to respect. She did not run. She did not perform bravery either. She simply said, "Tell me what I need to know to be safe. And then tell me what you need from me to make sure you are." Cian looked at her for a long moment. Then he told her everything. Her father called from Lagos the following Sunday. His voice was stronger than it had been in months. Tobe had told him. Of course Tobe had told him. There was a long silence on the line after Ada finished speaking. The kind of silence that fathers deploy when they are assembling the exact right words. "This man," Chief Okonkwo said finally. "He knows what you are?" "Yes," Ada said. "Not what he wants you to be, what you actually are." "Yes, Dad." Another silence. "Then put him on the phone," her father said. Cian spoke with Chief Emeka Okonkwo for 1 hour and 40 minutes that Sunday afternoon. Ada sat in the next room pretending to work on a brief, hearing nothing, reading the same paragraph 17 times. When Cian came back in, he sat down across from her. His expression was unreadable in the way that meant he was feeling something significant. "What did he say?" Ada asked. "Many things," Cian said. A pause. "He said if I break you, there is no corner of this world quiet enough." Ada closed her laptop. "And I told him I know." He looked at her. "I meant it. As for Jae-hyun, he recovered.
Partially.
Enough to keep operating, enough to keep his name in rooms that mattered, though never quite with the same ease as before. The financing never fully returned. The board never felt quite as solid. He gave no more interviews about Ada Okonkwo. He did not reach out. He did not apologize. Men like Jae-hyun rarely do, not because they feel nothing, but because feeling something would require admitting the full weight of what they threw away. Whether he understood that in quiet moments, alone, in the Apgujeong apartment, in the particular silence of a life built on the wrong foundations, nobody knows. Some endings do not get witnessed. They just happen privately, in rooms where no one is watching. That is the story. Or at least, that is the part of it that can be told in one sitting. Because the truth about Ada Okonkwo is not that she found a powerful man and everything became easy. The truth is that she came back to a city that tried to write her ending without her permission, and she took the pen back. Quietly. Completely. On her own terms, before anyone arrived to help her. Sian did not rescue her. He recognized her. There is a difference. And that difference between being rescued and being recognized is everything. Now, before I let you go, I need to ask you something. If you were Ada, would you have gone back? Not for the business. Not for the contract. For yourself. Would you have walked back into the city that broke you, knowing he was still there, knowing the wounds were still fresh enough to reopen? Or would you have chosen the safer life, the distance, the version of healing that does not require you to stand in the same rooms as your pain? And what about the moment Ada told Sian, "Don't make me regret not pretending"? Do you think that was strength? Or do you think that was the bravest, most terrifying thing she ever said to anyone? And finally, Sian told her everything. The danger, the world beneath the world. All of it. Do you think real love always requires that kind of truth? Or are there things you protect the people you love from, even when protecting them means they never fully know you? Leave your answers in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know what you think. If this story moved you, please subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit the like button and the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. New stories go up every week. And what is coming next, I promise you, is unlike anything you have heard on this channel before. I will see you in the next one.